introducing yourself. So I think it's good evening, everyone. How are you? Lovely to see you all. My name is Aurelia Monene. I'm part of the ADA Africa group organization, and I am a researcher in my own right. I work in the area of gender, sexual reproductive health, and children and youth. I'm very pleased to see you all today. And this is part of what we do in the Africana Journal Club, which is a program under ADA Africa. And our main role with the journal clubs is to encourage members to talk about their research, to participate in the different group mentoring activities that we have, because we believe the best way to learn research is by doing, and the other best way to learn research is by teaching it or by sharing about what you're doing. So we are very pleased today to be honored by one of our members, an amazing scholar, young scholar, but quite rigorous and very interested in research. Her name is Rissi Wesonga. She's a precision medicine practitioner. She's currently based in Zimbabwe. She will tell us better. And today she's going to let us in on an area of interest of ours, which is about newborn screening and the future of childcare. I think this is very important, particularly in our context, where we might have high mortality rates, infant mortality or neonatal rates. We also have children thriving, and we also have currently even children being born with disability, but then discovered very late. So I don't want to preempt. I don't know the angle Rissy will take this, but I would like to welcome her to do the presentation. Rissy, you can be putting up the slides. The etiquette for today, Rissy will present, and then we can invite interactions. If you have a question, we want it to be interactive. Please just put your hand up and ask a question. We will also have a dedicated Q&A session where you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you're not comfortable with unmuting, you can always put it on chat. So let's journey together and learn more about newborn screening. Welcome, Rissy.
Thank you so much, Aurelia, for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. As you've heard, I'm a daughter of the house, in the house today. So I just wanted to know maybe how many of us have ever heard of newborn screening before I start. Perhaps you can indicate a yes or no, or in the chat box. How many of us have ever heard of the word newborn screening or the term? Okay, it's a good number. If you've not heard, don't worry, we are going to unpack it and know what newborn screening is all about in a bit. So my talk today will be more of an introductory session, whereby I want to talk to us about this newborn screening in its entirety as a process, a tool, and a very important player in the future of child health care. So newborn screening is also known as the baby's first test, because where we are going, the future we are thinking about, the future that we are going to, it is believed that every baby will have their genome sequenced at birth, and that would be a very good thing, and I'm going to show us how in a bit. Okay, let's see. So this will be our outline for the day. We'll introduce us to newborn screening, the concept, then we can look at the global perspectives on the same. We will then go through methods used for screening, look at the treatment options that are currently available, see why this method is very important, as well as go through a few of some use cases in the Philippines, which is like the global perspective, in Africa, and also in Kenya. So somebody might ask this question, why NBS, why newborn screening? And I would like to start it off by this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes by Hippocrates. It is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. Isn't that just amazing, like mind-blowing? We don't want to know the disease that you have. We want to know who are these people that have the disease. So that is this is a true definition of what newborn screening is doing, because immediately at birth we want to identify which are the babies who have certain set of diseases and what can we do about it. So newborn screening in this context is, according to the CDC, is a mandatory public health program. This is in developed countries, which is designed to detect in newborns congenital disorders, which are leading to developmental impairments and physical disability. So basically what we are saying here is that every child who is born, according to the CDC, has the right to go through newborn screening should the service be provided. However, in our current context in Africa, we don't have this kind of capacity. Like the access is limited, so only a few babies get to go through the newborn screening process. And overall, our aim in newborn screening is to diagnose, prevent, and treat. And we're going to see how exactly we are doing this. So there's a certain criteria for which we select disorders that are eligible for newborn screening. So some of them, I've listed them here, which is early identification would benefit the newborn. We also select disorders which are the treatment is currently available. We also select disorders where the nature of the condition is actually justifies the population-based screening. So newborn screening, like I had mentioned before, we are not just targeting one baby, we want to target an entire population. So if we say, let's speak in Nairobi, we want to do newborn screening, it means that we have to visit all maternity hospitals in Nairobi, because the test is usually performed within 24 hours to 72 hours. So we want to make sure that every baby in every maternity ward in Nairobi gets to experience newborn screening. Oh, sorry about that. I was muted for a bit. So where did I leave you guys? Hello?
You left us that every baby should get to experience newborn screening.
Okay, thank you. So so every baby should get to experience newborn screening. However, that is not the case. And this is more so in under-resourced setting, whereby sub-Saharan Africa, where we are, Kenya, and Zimbabwe, where I'm currently based, we don't really have this because there's limited access to these methods of diagnosis. So here I was trying to explain the criteria for which conditions are usually selected for newborn screening. And one of them was that early identification, if early identification of the disorder would benefit the newborn, then we would screen for that disorder. If there's a treatment option that is currently available, that has been proven and is known to be available, then we would screen for that disorder. And then if the nature of the condition justifies population-based screening, then what this means is that if, for instance, we were to screen for babies in Nairobi, then we will have to go to every maternity ward in Nairobi to screen for those babies. And if the numbers justify that we should screen for that condition, then ideally we're going to do that. And also I want us to keep in mind that what we are screening for are usually some very, very rare disorders like we are going to see. But then in my field, we usually say that rare is common, rare is pediatric, rare is genetic, and rare is common. And I'm going to demonstrate this in a bit. So also another aspect that we look at is that there should be a good screening test that exists. So what happens is that there are some disorders, congenital disorders, these are disorders that you are born with that are there, but we don't have efficient screening methods for them. And also we need to, a last factor that we consider, which we cover today, is the benefits justify the cost for screening. So if screening for this disorder will ensure that this individual will live a very good life and live a productive life from screening, then the cost of screening is justified in this sense. Okay, let's move on. So this is the on my right, from this picture, as you can see, the foot is the foot of a baby, and as you can see, the nurse is wearing gloves, and this diagram here where you are seeing something that looks like blood, so this is called a dried blood spots, DBS sample. So what this means is that we won't like take a whole lot of blood from the baby. We just do something called a heel prick test, a small prick on the baby's foot, and then we get a dot of blood, just a little bit of it. That is all that is required for the baby to get this kind of screening. So I'm stating this just to address the worry that, oh, but the babies are too young. Why would we be wanting to prick them? They're still very young. So it's just a very small prick, and it has to be done 24 hours to 72 hours after birth. This is to help save most of the babies, because if the more we let the baby continue to grow, in this case, we are looking at actually neonates, 0 to 28 days old. These are the people we are targeting. We want to ensure that within 72 hours, we already have an idea of whether the baby has a certain condition or not. And if they have a certain condition, we need to do a confirmatory test. So on this side, there's a timeline. So the first time that any baby was screened for, the first disorder was phenylketonuria. And this was in 1967, and one person developed a certain test for this. Then following that, somebody else was able to develop a test for congenital hypothyroidism. As you can see, these are all medical terms, but if you think about it, they're just disorders whereby either a certain enzyme is not functioning, a certain gene is not producing a certain enzyme, or maybe for that baby, they don't have something to remove a certain enzyme from the body, so you can't give them. It's like something like, let's say, biotinidase deficiency. It means this baby does not have enough biotinidase in the body, so we need to give them a diet full of that biotinidase to compensate for them. So this is like the timeline that we have right now in newborn screening, and as you can see, we have moved from just screening one disorder, PKU, to now screening about 50, depending on the method, to even 70, or even genomic newborn screening. I'll explain that later. So we have really advanced in this field. And in terms of the global perspective, according to Parking Elmer report in 2021, 134 million babies are born in the world each year, and only a third of these receive screening of any type, that is, if there is. And most of them, they only receive screening for 1 or 2 conditions. And unfortunately, in Africa, where we are, sometimes the baby does not get any form of screening at all. And the hard part will start when now the clinical symptoms start to show, and you have to walk from one doctor to the next, trying to find a diagnosis for your disorder. And as you can see on my right, this is another picture just showing that even in developed nations like the European, whereby instead of now only 1 or 2, we have some areas screened for 1 to 10 diseases, 11 to 20, some 21 to 30. And you find that this variability is because of the capacity. Do we have infrastructural capacity? Do we have enough money to offer these screening services? That would be what would be influencing the ability of a region to screen. So screening is not just an individual. You cannot just wake up and say, I want to screen these babies. No, you have to think about, where is the money coming from? In this area, which disorders should we prioritize for screening? So it's more of a public health problem that requires a public health approach to solve. Okay. And these are the steps in newborn screening. So what we do is you screen, the hospital collects the dried blood spots like I demonstrated earlier. Then this is transported to a central laboratory. So why they do this is because the screening machine, the currently available one for traditional screening, is very expensive. So not everybody can afford to buy it and have them in their lab. So in most cases whereby we have the government funding such kinds of projects, you find that they have a machine at a central laboratory. So it means if it is in Nairobi, maybe the Nairobi government decides they want to let me admit a few people. They want to welcome, they want to perform newborn screening. Then what would happen is we can decide to choose, let's say, Kenyatta National Hospital, the maternity ward, and say, this is where we are going to be doing our screening. So then it means all the other maternity units in Nairobi will have to bring in their blood spots to this central laboratory. So that is why the transport section is here. And then once they are in the lab, we screen the dried blood spot for core and secondary conditions. So what do we mean by core and secondary conditions? What we mean by core is that the core are the conditions that we identify in that region. For instance, if we say in Machakos, most babies are born with phenylketonuria, then we'll say phenylketonuria is the core condition in that area. Okay, let's go to Eldoret, and then we say, oh, majority of the children born in Eldoret have congenital hypothyroidism, then that is what we will screen for as a core condition in that area. And then secondary conditions would be those conditions which in that particular population, they are likely to be occurring. So therefore, we will have to also screen for those. Okay, thank you, Aurelia. After that, we are going to report. So the goal of newborn screening, like I had mentioned, we want to identify affected children and we want to identify them early. So once we have done the screening in the laboratory, we have to report, we have to give a report back. So this is not just work that is done by the clinicians, by the researchers alone. We need to have the clinicians with us. We have to work with the clinicians. So it is not you as an individual who come and approach us and say, I want to screen my baby. Of course you can do that, but it is advisable for your physician at the maternity ward to know we have 20 babies, we have sent samples for screening, because once we identify babies who have a certain condition, then they need to get a certain level of care. And the care begins from birth, all through the baby's lifetime. So newborn screening is not a one-time thing that we test you and that's it, we leave you. No, we have to follow up on these babies. So that is why the physician has to be there. And that is why it is important to give back the report to the physician. Then it is the role of the physician to now take this information and give it back to the patient. Because most researchers, they don't really know how to speak to patients. We might tell you, oh, by the way, your baby has this, you know. So that is why we need the doctor to come and break this news to you. Because as a new parent, you don't want to hear that something is wrong with your baby. You know, when a baby comes, it's a very joyful occasion. You don't want to be in a position whereby you're hearing, oh, I don't know, the baby cannot eat, the baby cannot, You just want good news. But newborn screening might be bringing you good news in that the baby can be saved, but it is bad news in that the baby might be sick in a way. And then after that, the baby receives additional testing to confirm a diagnosis. That is what I'm saying, the confirmatory test. So the first test can be considered as a point of care test. Like immediately you are in the maternity ward, we screen the baby. Those ones that we suspect they have something, we have to do another test to confirm, is it true this baby has this? Because we don't want to also give you information that your baby has this disorder when it is a laboratory error, and then you go through all that mental torture only to later tell you, oh, sorry, ma'am, your baby is actually perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong. So we want to avoid that mix-up. So that is why we have to do another test to confirm. After that, the baby is taken to a specialist will be monitoring. This one in our African settings, it will be your day-to-day physician who cares for you, and the baby will be under special care, and the family will be educated on how to take care of this baby. If maybe the baby is not supposed to eat certain foods, we'll tell you this baby is not meant to eat these kinds of foods. If the baby is supposed to come in for specific set of IV infusions every day, we tell you this baby is supposed to come in for these types of infusions every day. So something like that. So this is the entire process of newborn screening. Let's move on. So in an ideal situation, the entire process should take 7 days, from blood collection, transit, laboratory testing, and even follow-up. But this is not the case. Like kwa grao vitu ni different, the way we say it in Kenya. And one such major player in this field of newborn screening is the Parking Elmer, and they have developed different kinds of machines that offer different kinds of screening at different capacities. And one such is the DBS puncher. So this is the one that will punch out the blood spots when you're in the lab. And then one such machine is the Victor 2D system, which has capacity to offer medium scale screening. That is, if let's say we want to screen in Nairobi, then we would want to buy a Victor 2D system, because it would be depending on the numbers. So you buy the machine depending on the number of babies that are born, and also the number of staff that you have. And some of the key diseases that they currently have kits for screening for are congenital hypothyroidism, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, glucose 6-phosphate deficiency, galactosemia, cystic fibrosis, biotinidase deficiency, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I'm sure all these terms are too medical, but yeah, that is what we call the disease. And if, as you can notice, galactosemia, galactose, glucose 6-phosphate, like if you are in the field of the molecular field, you can notice that those are just enzymes that have issues. And in some cases also you might need to buy a sequencer. That is now for genomic newborn screening, which is now the next wave of newborn screening, which is actually where I'm actively involved. I will explain to us later. And what will happen at the end is we can assess the genetic risk then from genomic screening. When it comes to why do we want to perform newborn screening, so many of these disorders that appear in newborns, if detected early, treatment can be provided, and you're going to prevent the children from going through what we call neurodegenerative, like your neurosystem degenerating, mental retardedness, and things like those. So most of these things that manifest either at early childhood or late adulthood, it's usually either you had a condition as a child, but since it was not detected, your body kept on producing that thing or could not produce that thing, and then, you know, what the people outside are seeing are just the physical manifestation of those things. I'm sure all of us right now in your head, you're thinking of that child back in your village who is maybe bound to a wheelchair somewhere, or who cannot talk, or who cannot, yeah, so it could be that they had one of these conditions, but because they were not able to, it was not able to be detected early, nothing could be done to them. And as a result, now they're suffering the consequences of staying too long before getting a diagnosis. Newborn screening also allows health professionals to identify and treat certain conditions before they make a baby sick. So for some things, if we know that the baby is sensitive to a certain enzyme, then we will tell you don't give this baby these kinds of food, because the food would induce the condition in the baby. So it's more of a lifestyle kind of choice that we're trying to make, but you want to make it immediately the baby is born. So if we know there's a deficiency, if the baby needs supplements, we're going to give them supplements. If they need to stop taking something, we stop giving them that. If they need to be on a certain drug, then we put them on the drug. So it is as simple as that. It is not complicated, guys. And we also want to identify conditions at birth and treat them early, increase the chances of the newborn growing up into a healthy, like I was explaining. If you don't do this early, it might be too late by the time you are getting it. And I'm going to show us an example of such a scenario. And of course, somebody might be asking, why is it important to do a retest? So we do retest in order to maximize the detection of all disorders, particularly milder forms that may benefit. So when the baby is born, usually most of the enzymes are very high. So we might get a wrong diagnosis. So in the newborn screening process, we might have to follow up the baby maybe after a week and again go and check, run another test just to confirm, did we miss anything during the first run? And then also it may be necessary to detect other conditions. For instance, if a baby has cystic fibrosis, we might need to do another retest, like a confirmatory test, just to be sure that the diagnosis is a true diagnosis. And also for some hemoglobinopathies that we have here, sickle cell anemia, sickle cell trait, beta thalassemia. These ones we want to again do a retest just to confirm so that we can eliminate the need for diagnostic lab work. Like we don't need to send you again to go and get a test after. We want to make sure that immediately your baby is born and goes through the newborn screening, we already know all sorts of conditions. If we tell you this baby is clean, like there's nothing wrong with them, we know that there's nothing wrong with that baby. But if we tell you, this baby we suspect there's something, we want to know it immediately they are born. We don't want to wait. And of course, some of the treatment options, like I was mentioning, for biotinase deficiency, we just treat with a diet high in biotin. So you'll be getting IV infusions, possible foods, so that we can boost. Carnitine uptake deficiency, this means the enzyme is inactive, so we give a low diet or maybe no diet at all. Citrullinemia, we treat with low diet low in protein. So it means there's an enzyme that is deficient in terms of its ability to maybe metabolize the protein or excrete the protein. So it's more of, we play a game of chance, diet. And that is what precision medicine is all about. We want to personalize care to specific groups of individuals. And that's it. So somebody might be asking this question, what does newborn screening mean to patients and their families? You won't really understand the essence of this test or this tool until you have a baby and then the doctor now brings you the news like, unajua nini, mtoto is this and this. So that is when you realize, oh, okay. So now you want to know, okay, what's wrong with the baby? So I'm going to show us what it means for their families. So the major thing, like I said, we want to give them timely access to diagnosis, we want to treat them, and we want to care for them. Because while some conditions like PKU and congenital hypothyroidism have long been implemented in many neonatal screening tests, other diseases such as SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency syndrome, or spinal muscular atrophy, they have been gaining growing attention. Like in the past, like the first wave of newborn screening, we used to have only machines that can screen for one disorder. So then other babies, you just know there's something wrong with the baby. Kuna shida na mtoto, but you don't know what the shida is. So majority of the families, you'd be moving from one doctor to the next, trying to find what is the shida with the mtoto, because at least when you know the shida with the mtoto, the problem with the child, you can know how to start or where to start from in terms of treatment. And this is like just a summary of the process. Neonatal screening, the disease is identified, we give early treatment, and we offer improved overall quality of life. We want everybody to have a proper quality of life. Like we want to give every baby a chance. Like for me, it's usually I want to give every baby a chance at normalcy. That is. And one such story is now the Philippine story of congenital hypothyroidism. And this is where I want the audience to participate. So on my right, I have Reina, and then on my left, I have Benji. So I want to know from the audience, how old do you think they are in this picture? How old do you think Reina is, and how old do you think Benji is? Anybody? You can type in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. Rina 9, okay. It's a good try. Anyone else? How old do you think Benji is? from just looking at the picture. Okay, let me see. Benji 5, Benji 1. Okay, it's a good try. So actually, in this picture, Rina is the one who's 5, Benji is 7. No, sorry, Rina is 2, Benji is actually 7 in this picture. And I know you might be wondering, why is Benji in a wheelchair? So what happened was that in the Philippines, both the two children, they have congenital hyperthyroidism. However, Rina was a beneficiary of newborn screening at age 2. They were able to detect it early, and she was able to be put on a supplement to help her manage her condition. Benji, on the other hand, only came to get care at a later stage. So let me show another picture of what happened afterwards. So this is Rina right now. She's an established lawyer in the Philippines. She's contributing to the society. However, Benji here, he managed to get a diagnosis, yes, but it was at 12 years. It was way too late. He had already had mental retardation and neurodegenerative disorders, like all those symptoms had already manifested. It was too late to save him. So as you can see, on one end, 2 people, same condition. One benefited from newborn screening, has been able to move on with their life. She takes a tablet, she takes an injection every day that helps her move, but she's able to work. She's not a burden to anybody in the society. She's able to fend for herself. You see, she's living a productive life. You see, she's even smiling. She's happy. But then Benji, who was not screened, is now suffering on this end, whereby somebody has to take care of him because he's now mentally retarded. He's the neural system has degenerated. He cannot be able to do anything, and he needs to be taken care of. So the mother now has to stay with him. And also another aspect of this is that Rina is based in the urban areas. That is why newborn screening was able to reach her early. However, Benji is based in the rural areas, and by the time access reached there, it was very late. So you can see there's a very great disparity in terms of your geographical location can even affect how you end up getting care or not. And those are some of the barriers we're trying to break them down. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance at quality medical care at an early age. So you can see what newborn screening can do in terms of the difference impacting the people. Then let's come to Africa now. So Africa, my home, this is where sickle cell disease is like 75% of the total global burden of sickle cell disease is in sub-Saharan Africa. And from this data on my right, you can see that a majority of children who are born with this condition, they die undiagnosed. That is 50 to 90% die undiagnosed and are not even able to live beyond 5 years of age. And the funny part is that every year, annually, over 300,000 babies are born with sickle cell disease. What does that mean? What that means is that the amount of people who are carrying the trait are very many. And because we are not doing enough awareness, so I'll just take this chance because it's Sickle Cell Awareness Month, actually, September. Since we are not doing enough awareness, more babies are being born with sickle cell disease. But the sad part is that we're not able to diagnose this. And this is where newborn screening is coming, because hemoglobinopathies is actually a priority in terms of newborn screening in Africa. And I'm just going to demonstrate on the next slide what is currently happening in this space. So when you come to Africa and you mention newborn screening, there's no newborn screening without mentioning sickle cell disease, because that is where the economic burden is very high. And right now we have something called the Consai initiative, Consortium of Newborn Screening in Africa. You can Google them out. And what they have done is, this initiative is of key players in Africa who are driving newborn screening. They have partnered with the American Society of Hematology and of course Packing Elmer, which is the company that supplies the testing kits. And they have launched newborn screening pilot programs in Ghana, Nigeria, Zambia, Uganda. There's one in Kenya, I believe, Jaramogi Oginga Teaching and Referral Hospital, Liberia, and Tanzania. So it has come to a point whereby Africa has realized they missed the first revolution. They cannot no longer stay behind. We need to catch up with other people, because right now the burden of non-communicable diseases, which is largely contributed like 18% by congenital anomalies, is actually rising in Africa. So some of these diseases like hypertension, diabetes, they could be lifestyle, like predisposing disorders, but then there are some among those, there are some that you are born with. So we want to be able to screen and offer special care to these children from the word go. And of course, let me come home to Kenya. How many of us remember baby Aya? If you are active on social media, there was a time where baby Aya was everywhere, and these are her photos, courtesy of their Instagram page. She's right now our awareness ambassador as SMA for SMA. So baby Aya was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, for those who have been following the story. And this is just one excerpt of one of the newspapers that featured her. But she really trended in 2021. And what made her trend was that despite a diagnosis, which is something most people don't have access to, baby Aya and her family were not even able to afford the kind of medication that was needed. This drug that you see here, it's just an injectable, and it's from Novartis, and it costs how much is that? 2.15 million US dollars. I mean, come on. Come on. So in terms of newborn screening, I know other questions are going to arise, like why do we want to screen them when we might not even have the types of treatment locally? And I'm going to answer those. But as you can see, newborn screening is very important. And there could be, why I put this picture here is that there could be other children like Aya who, due to lack of access to newborn screening, we were not able to identify them early. And maybe the child just got sickly and passed on. We did not even know what happened to the child. And this is actually a recent photo of Aya. She's able to support herself now, is learning to walk. So if you want to follow her story, you can check her Instagram page at little.aya. And she even has a website, and you can support her in terms of her continued treatment by buying the book. So all the information is actually on the website. Okay, so we are almost summing this up. And somebody might be asking, why am I making noise here, shouting about newborn screening? So my role in newborn screening as a genomics researcher, precision medicine practitioner, is I saw the need of newborn screening, especially for Africa. Africa, we missed the first revolution of newborn screening. When people were transitioning from single disorder testing to tandem mass spectrometry, we were not there. Then now people are transitioning to the third wave. We are now moving. We are saying this TMS has a lot of issues. There's error in diagnosis. It's too slow. Some disorders, we cannot capture them. We want to move to genomic newborn screening. Africa, we are still there. We're not doing anything. So that is why myself and my teammates, through the GNBS Explore project, the link is on the slide, we are able to, what we are doing is we are exploring, is there a way we can bring genomic newborn screening to Africa? As much as Consai has already started with using the traditional methods of screening, would it be, like, I would be happy if one day I would wake up and here in Nairobi, there's a certain sequencer. And what that sequencer does, it is just screening babies for certain disorders. Like, that would be a dream come true for me. And This is one of the articles we recently published, that is like last month, whereby we are documenting the traditional and genomic screening in newborn, or what has happened so far, with a special focus on Africa. So you might want to read that. And then in the works is the second publication, which is talking about genomic newborn screening. We have developed a pipeline, and we have also developed a panel, which we intend to, is still in the works, but we intend to make it more applicable to the African setting. So my goal is to ensure that when Africa will be ready for genomic newborn screening, I will be there. I will be sitting in those meetings where they're making those decisions. I will be part of the solution. You know, it is time we move beyond being saying there's a problem, there's a problem. We need to be part of the solution. And as a result, we recently got nominated for the Falling Walls Lab Nairobi 2022, and we will be pitching the work we are doing with newborn screening, with genomic newborn screening, that is later this month on the 28th. You might want to follow up on that. And of course, we have to give honor where it is due to the key contributors of our newborn screening. The first person is Dr. Robert Gutierrez. He was the one, excuse me, sorry. He was the one who developed the test for phenylketonuria. And as such, on his birthday, June 28th, we celebrate the World Newborn Screening. And in Africa, there was a man in Ghana. He's now late. He passed on early this year. May the Lord rest his soul in peace. Professor Ohene Frempong, who introduced newborn screening for sickle cell disease in Ghana. So through his efforts, all these other projects you are hearing, Consai, all these projects stem from his passion for newborn screening and his need to change the face of healthcare, neonatal healthcare in Africa. So that will be all from me, guys, and I will be able to take any questions now.
Wow, that was brilliant. Really, really brilliant, Rissy. I've learned so much about newborn screening, and I think all of us have. And what has impressed me so much is your passion, that when they are talking about newborn screening, you will be at that table. And I think that's what, even for us at ADA Africa, we are aiming for, that Africans are in charge of producing and using knowledge in the continent. And what is even more impressive, you've not even started your PhD. What if you start your PhD? What more can you do? So congratulations also for the winning the great, the Falling Walls. We will follow up, invite us in the Journal Club, and we will come to learn with you. Thank you for inspiring us. We can all sit at the table in our own disciplines and make a difference, big or small. So let's see what the chat has been active. Let me see some of the questions that have come up. Hi, Awino, welcome. So Awino is asking, why is it, why did Rina have early diagnosis? Is it sociocultural? You mentioned geography, but maybe you have another reason. Then Kate is asking, how do we get parents to inquire for screening in order that they may demand for access to screening? So in terms of advocacy, how can we amplify the parents' voice? Because they are the one who bear quite a bit of that. Great insights. Please speak a little about genomic sequencing, Kate says. Awino says it needs capacity building for Africa to move into advantage. I love that AID Africa is doing. Thank you. Could you please kindly discuss the role of NBS in the development of new therapies? Okay, that's from Collins. Thank you, Collins. Yes. Anyone else with a question? Rissy can take them. So just Rissy, note the one for NBS and new therapies. How do we increase capacity for parents? Speak a bit about genomic sequencing and the case of Rina and how come she was able to be diagnosed early, to go screening early. Any other? Please unmute. then Rissy can take them all. Just a minute for anyone who wants to ask. Okay, Rissy, you can go ahead and answer those. Then we come again if there's something else.
Okay, thank you so much, Aurelia. So I will start with why Rina got late screening. So that is a very great question. So what happens, like I mentioned earlier, newborn screening is a public health care solution. So you cannot do it as a standalone solution. So in the Philippines, based on location first, where Benji was based, like in the rural areas, newborn screening had not yet reached there. And then by the time he was also born, there was no stable implementation framework of newborn screening in that part of the world. However, Rina, by virtue of the parents being in the urban area, and by virtue of the government already launching the program in the urban area, that is how she was able to access healthcare. So the Philippines, if you follow the Philippines, because they are the largest leaders in terms of newborn screening, like they've really shown how practical the tool is. You will find that in their magazine they use this story to demonstrate how powerful newborn screening can be. The next one was about how we can amplify parents' voices. So this is actually an interesting one and a tough one. So for one is that, like you said, the parent is the one who's bearing the burden of living with a child who is sick, and there's actually nothing that can be done. So in my continent, Africa, currently what most parents are facing is a diagnosis odyssey. What do we mean by this? We mean that there is no diagnosis for these children. Few of them will get a diagnosis because maybe a test is available, or maybe based on the strength of the parent, like wow, they've moved from one doctor and the other one and found the other one, like financial access to financial opportunities, or maybe you have a better card, so you're going to a better hospital, so you might get a diagnosis. But that mother in the village who gave birth at home, and maybe just because the government has insisted, managed to go to the hospital, do you know the child will just die without anything happening? So it is a very sad situation, but it is actually what is happening. There's a very great disparity in terms of geographical location, in terms of the capacity to screen, because in Kenya is when we are now introducing it through the government, through the national government. And what they are screening for is only sickle cell disease. So it means if any other baby at GURTH is born with another condition that is not part of the public healthcare system, if they don't have a diagnosis test for it, then that child will go on not being diagnosed for anything, which is really sad. But that is the situation, my people. That is the situation in the ground. So maybe parents who have gone through this, like we saw what baby Aya did. If you just try and follow up on the story, they were really on social media. Like the mother really drove the wave of creating awareness and saying that I have a child, this is my situation, you really need to come in and help me. So I think if 5 parents with children with this kind of condition, 5 parents, like if we all join hands, like the way I was saying, rare is common, in that there might be 10 conditions, but maybe we have 5 people with this, 2 people with that. Like collectively, if you join hands and be able to say, we want to have our children screened, we want to have our children get the better care, we want to have our children get this, it would be very important. And another thing that I've seen that is working is actually patient support groups. In South Africa, they have what they call the Rare Disease Diagnosis of South Africa, and that is where the patients they get to speak up. They have their own people who go speak to the government and say, we need this policy changed. Or even if I don't go far to South Africa, there's the SCAF Kenya Sickle Cell Association, Sickle Cell Anemia Foundation of Kenya. They recently pushed for a policy to have sickle cell disease in Kenya actually recognized and as I think, a disability, and even they're requesting for some things from the government in terms of offering better healthcare. So your role as a patient is to join hands and find people, like-minded individuals, and people like us researchers who are pushing for this to ensure that we get the best kind of care for our children. Then somebody asked me to speak about genomic newborn screening. So what is happening is that in this field, in my field currently, we have in Africa, maybe I'll highlight the good part, is that the good news is that not everybody, whether you're in Europe, you're in China, you're in Japan, you're in the US, or you're in Africa, everybody is just trying to figure out how can we bring genomics to newborn screening. So that is why I was saying I am not going to stay behind and be late. Since I have the genomics knowledge, I want to be part of that crowd. So as the European people are doing their thing, we're also doing our thing here. So that when they say, okay, we have found a solution for newborn, we say, yes. Also us in Africa, we have found a solution. This is what would be practical to Africa. So everybody is trying it out. So what would happen in this case is that the same way we would sequence, let's say, bacteria or viruses or something, here we would be sequencing the blood spot. So the red blood spot, that is what we would be sequencing. And by sequencing the blood spot, what we are targeting would be the disease-causing genes in the child. If it is maybe say congenital hypothyroidism, maybe we know there are 5 genes with certain level of variants that have been confirmed to cause that disease. So we make sure that in our screening, when we're doing our bioinformatic analysis, we are looking for those genes. But what has been shown to be practical at this point is what we call the GNBS panels, the gene panels. So most of these countries, the groups that are working on this. So what is happening actually in the US, the government is funding what we call the BabySec project. So they've given them funds, give us a solution. In China, that is the same thing that is going on. In the UK also, the national government is funding. So as you can see, everybody is funding their own. So my question to you would be, who is funding us in Africa? Who is taking this initiative to fund us? So then the government has seen the benefit of this and has injected money into it. So they are funding them to help them tell us, how can we, using all this advancement in technology, using all this advancement in genomics and bioinformatics, how can we better help these people? Because as I had mentioned, the traditional methods of screening can only screen for disorders that we know this is the biomarker. This is what is causing this disease. But what about those ones that we don't know what is causing the disease? It means we cannot screen for them. So that is why genomics newborn screening is coming in. And then as you noticed from my slide, the conditions I was showing, most of them were inborn errors of metabolism. So there are other rare diseases that cannot be screened through that. There are other diseases like SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and SCID. They cannot be screened through that method. You need to do sequencing. So that is where sequencing is coming. So sequencing is like the new hot cake that is going to revolutionize this process of newborn screening. And in terms of the role of NBS in the development of new therapies, it's that what happens is the same way once we know, as you've seen most of these disorders, it's a pathway change, an enzyme defect, or something like that, right? So in the field of precision medicine, what we would do is, if we know that it is this enzyme that is defective, right, we would try to develop a targeted therapy. Maybe do we want to help the body produce the enzyme better, or do we want to switch off a gene or something? Although all those things right now, they are still more theoretical than practical. But companies like Novartis and the others, they have actually put money aside to try and help solve this. So there are solutions in the works. And unfortunately, for most of these disorders, even though Africa, we are at the diagnosis stage, we are not able to diagnose, we also, unfortunately, don't have treatment options available locally. So what might happen is you might find yourself in a situation, we give you a diagnosis, but we tell you, for this child, this drug, you might have to be importing it from such and such a place. But then the solution we're trying to offer is that these individuals, they are very few individuals, and by virtue of philanthropy, the government can come up and support. Like, would it be easier to just pay for medication for a few people, or to let people spend their entire life being taken care of and not building the economy? So the cost-benefit ratio of newborn screening, that the cost you use for screening and supporting these children is way less as compared to what you lose out on without treating these children. So I'll give it back to you, Aurelia. Any more questions for me?
Thank you, Rissy. Let me just check. Maybe there are two, I think. So the other one is from Benta. She asked, as treatment options for these diseases are still costly, would you say by making NBS a necessity, this can influence in bringing down the cost? And then Awino says, from this representation, I would say it's important to build medical capacity building booths for the parents. Do they exist? Disparities are more in the rural areas. So those are some of the, I think those are the two questions.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Latifa. So indeed, treatment options is something that we can work with. So why am I saying this? Do you know, at this point, since we don't know how many babies in Kenya or maybe in Nairobi alone have phenylketonuria, we cannot go and buy the drug. Like even the pharmacy, how will you convince the pharmacy or the manufacturers to maybe manufacture the drug locally or import it? So we need to give them the numbers. So we have to understand where we are as Africa. We are at the diagnosis stage. So we need to improve diagnosis so that when we are standing to maybe talk to the government or the person or a funder or a donor who decides, I want to help these kids live a better life, I want to give them money for medication, we need to have the numbers. So we tell them, okay, in Nairobi, out of the children born in 2022, 50 had this condition, 60 had this condition, 70 had this condition. So therefore, we think as a government, we want to prioritize screening for this condition. And as such, when you go into the venture of doing newborn screening, you will not just screen. Like I said, it is not just about screening. You need to have the mindset that after I've screened, then what? So you need to have a system in place to ensure that there are clinicians that are going to follow up on these patients, to ensure that there are medication that these patients are going to have access to ensure that there's appropriate care that is given to these people. And in terms of the medical capacity, we know at this moment I cannot really comment in Kenya because I know it's when they launched the newborn screening for sickle cell disease. So I'm thinking based on the systems that they'll set in place for that, and the outcome of the entire project, they can be able to project how best to address that. And in terms of in Nairobi, I think Gertrude Hospital is doing something. I'm not really familiar with what exactly they're doing, but I know they're doing screening and they're also doing treatment. And in terms of disparities, discrepancies, yeah, it is there. The discrepancy is there. But we need to provide a solution. And the solution is you and me and your neighbor telling people, if you see a child who looks sick, you say, do you know there's something called newborn screening? Can you talk to your doctor about it? And maybe the doctor might be prompted to help you find a solution. So it is me, it is you that is the solution and the change that we need wherever we are.
Thank you. You brought it home very well. Thank you very much. Any question for Rissy before we close? Please fill in the feedback form. We always like some feedback so that we can know how to improve, and also share it with Rissy. It was really very illuminating and passionate. 1 minute, anyone who has something to say?
Yes. Hi, Rissy.
Oh.
Hi.
Yeah, I have something to say, and I just wanted to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I am actually, my story is very similar to what we're talking about. I'm a parent of a deaf child who was not screened at birth. I only got to realize when he was around 1 year and something. And then by the time, like you said, exactly like you said, by the time I could raise funds to get him like a cochlear implant, was already 4, and he had reached key language milestones, and he's still to be delayed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nani?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Somebody's
Yes, please.
unmuted.
Okay, yeah. So he's still delayed. He still has a bit of language delays. He's 9 now, and I can tell you what you're doing is really necessary. And when you're ready to present your research to the government and you need the voices of parents, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's really important that we all work together to push this forward. It will take more than just the researcher to bring this to light. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Kate. And yeah, I think it's important that we do have for us to add voice because our problems in Africa are interrelated. So whatever cause we feel is important that can make our Africans' life easier, let's all join the cause. So if parents need us, let us be there to add on to their voice, even if we're in culture, even if we're in any other field, we are all needed to add voice. Any other final comments? Rissy, do you have any closing comments if no one else?
Maybe I'd just like to say that this particular venture is a very tough one in that we are just starting, like Africa, we are playing catch up, but I believe it's still doable. It's better late than never. And as we go back to our homes, I just want us to reflect that there's something called newborn screening, and it could be beneficial to your child, maybe for those who are anticipating to have children, and those who've already had children, maybe the future children. And it is something that, God willing, with the help of the government, we can be able to bring it to our home, that is Kenya, and also in Africa. And it's something that I follow so passionately, and I'll continue pushing for it to the best of my ability. So we are just getting started.
We wish you the best. So please fill in the feedback form. And then I would like to close the meeting and wish you a lovely evening. I'll see you all next. I think the next meeting we are having is next Saturday. We are reviewing a paper. We are still continuing with our critical review of papers so that we can improve on our critical questioning. We can also learn how to peer review articles very well. So join us next Saturday, 7 to 8 p.m. We shall review a few papers. So I want to wish you well. Have a lovely, lovely evening. And thank you so much, Rissy. We will share the recording and the slides, as always, in the group so that you can be able to reflect and access them. So take care and bye-bye.
Thank you and bye.
Bye.